All right, welcome in. This is episode 2 of the Take Chances podcast. I am your host, Chance Mack, and I am so excited to have you all here with me again. Today, I have an exciting guest with me today. I don't want to overhype him, but you'll learn a little bit about his story today, and you'll understand why I'm so excited for him to be here with us today. His name is Daylon Baker. I'll refrain from saying your middle name unless you wanted me to, man. But super excited to have you on,
Appreciate
Matt.
it.
How you doing?
Man, I'm blessed, but honestly, I'm better than I deserve. So that's the best way I can sum it up for us. So
Yeah, man. I'm over the moon to have you on, man, especially as my first guest on the Take Chances podcast, just because I feel like you're an integral part of my story. We literally have came through the ranks together. Just to give you guys some background and some context on Daylon. Um, I went to high school with Daylon. So I met Daylon when I was about 15 years old. And, you know, we immediately clicked, right? Like we were playing football together, but just outside of that, we just became friends and our relationship just continued to build. And I don't even consider Daylon a friend today. This is like a part of my family. This is my brother. So I'm extremely proud of Daylon. Daylon's done some amazing things, and we're going to get into, his career path and his background. But Daylon, just take a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are from a high level, and then we'll get into the story.
yeah, definitely. Likewise, man. I appreciate the love, appreciate the opportunity to join the podcast. But man, I mean, what more can I say? I'm 29 years of age. Again, my name is Daylon, originally from my hometown is Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm an AT alien at heart. From a career perspective, man, my big focus is sales and marketing. So if there's a product offering or if there's a service at play, as long as I understand the value prop, we can make something happen. We can take it to market and actually see some return on investment. So that's really been my whole angle, especially for the last 8-9 years since I've been really heavily focused on my career and trying to grow, at least from a corporate perspective. So hopefully that gives a little bit of insight as to myself
Yes,
at
sir.
a high level.
Absolutely, man. And we're going to get all in your business today, man. And the goal of this podcast is to be the number one business podcast for young people. We understand that, now is a critical time in our country's history. Just with everything that's going on in technology, everything that's going on socially, young people are thirsty for knowledge, right? And young people are thirsty for different ways to express themselves, to build, their character and build businesses, right? So that's the purpose of this podcast. And we do three things on this podcast. We do interviews, we discuss tech news, and we review products, right? And we're doing three things in terms of pillars that we have, and that's to discuss tech, culture, and people, TCP. So with that being said, last week I talked about the quote of the day being from Robert Smith, and it was about prioritizing just your daily task and what's important to you overall, right? This week we got a quote from the great Simon Sinek, and it comes from his book Start With Why. And the quote is, "When you compete against everyone else, no one wants to help you. But when you compete against yourself, everyone wants to help you." I'll say it again. When you compete against yourself, or actually, when you compete against everyone else, no one wants to help you. But when you compete against yourself, everyone wants to help you. That's a deep quote. And that's truly inspirational for me because, you know, it's so challenging to do a podcast, man. I was so nervous about putting myself out here and just, expressing myself um, in such a long form way where people can really see who I am, right? But I've found that the more that
Right.
I, express myself, the more people are willing to help me and get involved. So again, Dalen, thank you for being on
Definitely.
today. And you talked about sales and marketing in your little intro, but let's understand,
Right.
what you do today, and let's get into your career path. So take it away.
Yeah. So honestly, my career hasn't been traditional in any particular sense. When I graduated high school, To be completely honest, I didn't know what direction I was gonna go. Most of my friends, they wanted, they were going the college route. Most were going off to college somewhere else. Especially, either out of state or maybe on the outskirts of the state of Georgia. For me, I didn't really make any real hard preparations on what was next. I come from a blue collar background where my dad, he owns a landscape management group. And so pretty much since I was 7 years old, I started picking up sticks and gradually, graduating to the point where, I could actually provide some supervising support, kind of operating, as a foreman, somewhat as a little bit of a manager, and really support my dad's business as it's grown over the years. That's where I really learned business 101. So when I graduated high school, honestly, I had a lot of in and out jobs, a lot of odd jobs, whether it was, working preload shift at UPS or, eventually working at a racetrack, getting, basically being a cashier. And really those two jobs were pivotal. For a short period of time, one summer, man, I worked as like a retail associate at Forever 21, up at Town Center Mall. So, I had a weird journey in the very, very late teens, early 20s. Eventually I never forget this 1 second where this one season of my life where, man, like super stressed, I was broke. And I remember I went to this Taco Bell on Powder Springs Road, near where my first apartment was. And I was so broke, man. I used to get the $2 meal deals, right? And I remember I bought one, ate it, and then I asked for an application. And I remember, I filled it out, gave it to the manager, and the manager was like, he just kind of had a word with me, was like, bro, brother, you don't look like, this is really for you. This is the path for you. This is where you need to be at. He was like, I'm happy to call you next week, but I just want to tell you that's just not, I don't think this is next for you. And so that moment always stuck with me because it felt like a low moment, but nonetheless, I didn't give up. I kept getting up every day, kept getting after it, kept working. And eventually I ended up getting an opportunity where I walked into a Sprint store where my dad, he was going in to upgrade all his business phones. And we met a guy by the name of Christopher Polnitz. And this brother, he really served as like a guiding light really early on in my career, especially as me trying to establish my corporate footing as a business athlete. And went in a Sprint store, upgrade these phones. We probably were in there 2 hours, good conversation, did business. Eventually, he said, hey, man, he said, you might like it in here, man. It's, I could see you being a good salesperson. Had never really thought about going into sales. And hey, eventually, conversation starts to wind down, and he introduced me to his manager. His name was Taylor Driscoll. And this had to be the very beginning of 2012. So we're talking about 8 years ago. From that point, man, everything just really developed. Came back in like a week and a half later for an interview. And before I knew it, by the beginning of next month, I was basically a retail consultant at a Sprint store. And was just trying to figure out what sales really was, inside and out from a wireless telecom perspective. So, I was in there slinging cell phones and that good stuff. And that's really where my sales career started, right there in the trenches, as Future would say. So that's a little bit of the beginning of it, at least.
Absolutely, man. And what's funny is I remember those dog summer days when you were working at racetrack. I can't remember what job I had at the time, but we just spent so much time together, man, just working, going, like, just trying to figure out what's
Target.
Yeah, absolutely. I was working at Target. Man, $7.50 an hour, man, and just really working so hard as a young person, man, and I knew that we were going to be successful, but I just knew like Target racetrack wasn't it for us, man. So when you talk about the Taco Bell story, man,
absolutely.
When you talk about the Taco Bell story, man, I just feel like, I've been there too, man. Like I'm outside pushing carts, it's 40 degrees outside. I'm like, man, I'm better than this. No disrespect, but I just felt like, I had that internal pride to say like, hey, man, I could do a lot more. And I know God has called me for greater than this, man. So, I've been there, man.
Amen.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about your sales journey, and you talk about your first step being in the Sprint store. And let's talk about that, because that was like, once you got that opportunity, a few months later, you brought me into the Sprint store, man. You was like, yo, Chance, you got to apply. And that kicked off my sales career as well. So talk a little bit about your sales time at Sprint and where it went.
Yeah, man. So it first thing, what I will say is I've always kind of been blessed with the mentality of, hey man, if the well with the water is over here to the left, let my peoples know so we can all drink, right? And so got in there, really didn't know much other than what I learned just from business working with my dad, but just try to apply this mentality that, hey, if you be straightforward, people be straight with you. And if you talk to people, with some sense, typically they'll respond back, in a decent manner at least.
Yeah.
And so from there, man, just got in there, had to put my head down, went through like the little sales training, and eventually started to do pretty well, right? And so man, we was hitting some monthly numbers and ended up on the district list. And I remember back then we had a district manager by the name of Omar Jones, and he would always talk little small things like, walk people to the door when you finish the transaction, and make sure you hand the receipt and circle the return exchange date policy that was on the receipt. Little small things to try to decrease churn.
Mm-hmm.
I learned words like churn. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right, in terms of the business acumen and getting up to speed. So that was a good experience at that point. Did that for maybe 5 or 6 months, and eventually I wanted to go really start that corporate experience. I wanted to be in the office and possibly work from home and just see what that was like. But how do you do that, right? How do you find that next opportunity? And so that's where networking came into play. And then also not being afraid to go to management and say, hey, listen, this is the journey that I see for myself. I can't see retail forever. So talk to my manager, got his approval. I was right around 5 months, applied for a job and got an interview. And it was to be basically a wireline pricing analyst. And if you know, wireline is just it's a telecom piece of equipment, but that's a whole different conversation. But I got a chance to interview, and the interview went well. And really from there, ended up getting a job in November 2012. And that was really the beginning of really feeling like I'm a true business athlete. In that role, I got a chance to work from home, basically 3 days a week. We only went to the office twice. And again, whenever I try to get on, hey, the water's in the well over here. So you remember those days, Matt? I remember Leon, that was our manager. He came like, hey, look, man, he said, love having you on the team. I want to bring on another brother. Let me know if you know somebody. I said, I know somebody. And just so happened to be my roommate. And so it just ended up going out good. And so you came over, we was on the same team. So that was really like that growth, but that was a sales support role, so growing from being in the store on the front lines to now, we're supporting the enterprise account executives in the field.
Yeah. And I remember we learned so much during that time as, sales support roles with Leon. And Daylon, you were instrumental during my time there too, man. Like, I remember our first time getting a raise. And I'm thinking, I'm me and Daylon were roommates at the time, and Daylon's in my ear hyping me up, man. He's like, so he's looking up stuff on Google, talking about, the average person in this role probably makes 50,000. So we should be around like 48,000. So, and I think at the time we were making like 33,000 or something like that. So I remember like, being so excited. I was being so excited, man. Daylon hyped me up so high. And, the day comes where we go have the conversation with our manager. I'm sorry for laughing, man. I know it's supposed to be a business podcast, but it's so funny. And it's so important for young people to understand this, right? I remember, you know, the day comes where
Right.
it's time for us to go have that conversation with our manager. And, you know, Leon pulls me to the side and he's like, Chance, you know, you've been doing some great work. You know, you've been here for a few months and, you know, we want to reward you, you know, with the raise. And then he slid me the paper and showed me what the raise was. It was like, the raise was like 25 cents, like on per hour. I'm like, yo, like, you know, this is close to the 48,000, you know, that we were expecting. And, you know, so I go first, right? First, though. And Daylon sits next to me. And Daylon's, I came back to the desk and Daylon was like, you know, he said, how'd it go? And I said, you'll see. I said, you'll see, man. I didn't want to spoil the moment for him. So he went over and he came back and I could just see he was so disappointed. He was so I was like, yo, I'm in tears right now because that moment really like just changed my life and just kind of opened my eyes to like, you know, just we got to stop getting our hopes up as young people, man. Like, especially, you know, as young people, we think the world of ourselves, right? And we just think we deserve everything. And I don't think we ever took the entitled approach, but we just felt like, hey, man, like, you know, we're worthy of a lot, right? And that moment really humbled me and kind of gave me the foundation to say like, hey, like, you know, we got to earn everything that we get from here on out. Like nothing is going to be handed to us. We got to earn it. So yeah, man, that was good times, man. Good times.
Amen.
So, like, so tell me about like where you went from there after Sprint. What'd you do?
Yeah. So eventually, was in that role for maybe about a year and 4 months. Obviously because of the work from home experience was great. Mm-hmm. And then eventually was like, man, I want to get back on the front lines. I want to chase these dollars. I want that commission back, right? And so ended up getting a role as an account manager on the wireline side with Sprint. And in that role, you know, we were slinging everything from M to M offerings, machine to machine, tracking assets. We were slinging, of course, corporate liable accounts, so anything from a handset to a tablet. And then we was even some more of the basic voice over IP phone systems, not the advanced, not the SIP trunking and unified communications, but the early stuff. We were distributing that and did that for about 9-10 months, and eventually just knew that Sprint was going through so many changes. Now we're talking about the time where Dan Hesse is transitioning out, and we got Marcelo coming in, and we got SoftBank taking over. So I said, man, listen, I want to get with a big player in the game, you know, who don't have no particular issues financially and who's number one in the market. Mm-hmm. From our career, I felt like associate with the right brands, that'll help elevate you to the next opportunity, right? Mm-hmm. And so after being with Sprint from basically 2012 to the very, very beginning of 2015, transition over to Comcast NBC. And that particular company.
Let me pause you right there because you just dropped a gem that I want young people to really hone in on. Yeah. And that's associating yourself with the right brands, and that will elevate your career. I think too often young people chase money, right? Like we chase just a bigger base salary, but it's so important that you recognize the position that brand that you're working with has in the market, because that can elevate your profile as a business athlete, as you talked about earlier. So that was a true gem. So get back into your story about Comcast. Like what'd you do at Comcast?
Yeah. So, you know, got with Comcast, initially wanted to come in as an account manager. That just didn't work out, but actually ended up in the end. One thing I would say is, you know, sometimes a temporary denial is what it is. It's just temporary. Mm-hmm. And also you never know really sometimes what you were denied might be worse than what is coming, right? So maybe there was something better down the line and you just got delayed a little bit. I'm a person of faith personally, so that's how I look at things, but it's all good. But the main thing, I came in as a logistics coordinator. So I was on the logistics team. I reported to the director of construction. So we handled a lot of the on premise and or you might say on footprint development construction wise for Comcast business. And so we supported that build out throughout the metro Atlanta area, basically establishing service in corporate B, corporate A structured buildings where there was no service. Did that for a little bit over a year. And, it was a good experience, gave me a chance to learn Comcast from a sales support role. Also, it was my second time. So at this point, I've been in two roles where I was in a direct sales role. That account manager role, that was direct sales, and then obviously being a contract analyst with Sprint, and then now being a logistics coordinator with Comcast. I felt I was 2 and 2, direct sales and sales support, and I felt like I was progressing at a good pace. And now I was really ready to get back on the hunt. And I knew the big step I needed to take to really advance my career at this point was to become an account executive. So now we fast forward, we're in 2016. I get the role as an account executive working for Comcast Business. I'm working in, Buckhead, Atlanta, Georgia, high dollar areas is my territory. And it's, come in and I'm just excited. And we're looking for net new business. And this is really where I learned the skill sets that were needed to go from nothing but a cell phone, maybe an iPad, a sales support in office, to building a book of business that can generate 6 to 7 figures in terms of monthly recurring income for Comcast Business. And so, being in that particular position as an account executive, it taught me a lot. It taught me about hard work. It taught me about the importance of, first and foremost, how to talk to people when, hey, they don't know you. It taught me also how to overcome objections. It also taught me really who I am as a person. It also taught me about time management, because I didn't have, I had a sales manager, right? But this is outside sales. This ain't report to the office every day environment. And chances, man, one of the toughest things when you get to that point as account executive in sales, when you don't have that visibility over you, it's what are you going to do at that time when nobody's watching?
Yeah.
And that's really going to decide the growth, that you have in your sales career. So that was really kind of where I learned a lot of my bones, particularly there.
Yeah, man. And you touched on it a little bit, just discipline, right? And when you get into an outside sales role, you have pretty much full autonomy over your schedule, right? And it's so important that you just have that mental fortitude to lock down on revenue generating activities, right? Because there's so many distractions in the sales space where you could just be, doing research, right? But it's so important that you just pick up the phone, or you go visit a client, or you sending something to a client, because that discipline is going to really be what sets you up for success long term, right? And also, just to that point, as a salesperson, you might not get a sale every day, right? Like, you're not going to get a sale every month, and especially in these enterprise level deals, they take months to develop. But at the same time, you have to have that mental discipline to say, hey, I'm going to just keep calling. I'm going to keep chipping away at this opportunity until it comes home. And that's the biggest thing that I would say for salespeople, people that are interested in sales careers, is just to make sure that you have that mental discipline, for sure. So, Daylon,
mental discipline.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was gonna say mental discipline. I definitely agree. Other part I would say is within sales, you'll definitely learn that you can't do it by yourself. And what I mean by that is no matter how you close the deal, assuming you're doing it legally and ethically with good morality, the number of deals you can close. One thing I learned is you need partners. You need people who you can always lean on as a resource. You need people you can reach out to who might be able to provide you a lead. So networking and developing the right partners, especially early in your sales career, is something that's going to be essential to your success, especially when you don't really know many people at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say your network is your net worth, right? Like that phrase has been, extremely true in my career. And it seems like that's been the same in yours as well. Just because, you might meet somebody today but you never know what role that they can play within your career, right? Like they could become a mentor for you, or they could just become, someone that you lean on for just business advice in
Absolutely.
general. So yeah, it's very important to network and
Right.
build that network, build real relationships. Right.
Yep.
So keep
Right.
advancing your story,
Absolutely.
man. Like talk to me about, what was the next
Yeah.
step for you?
Yeah. So it did well at Comcast, came out the gates, was hitting it really, really hard. And eventually, I kind of hit a wall. I was kind of questioning whether I wanted to even be in sales, any further, as I
Yeah.
kind of transitioned into the beginning or middle of 2017. And I'll say a lot of that was just driven by, we started getting some good commission checks and, bills is paid on time kind of thing. And you in a good space. You start kind of looking around, you
Mm-hmm.
start trying to figure out, what could happen, what could be next and what else could you do? And so eventually I ended up finding myself in a position where I knew it was time to get out of wireless and wireline telecommunications as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to transition either into software sales where I had no experience, or go into some type of marketing where I knew how to take a product, directly to consumers, directly to businesses from a B2B perspective, and how to start, that sales cycle, right? And actually bring it all the way to the close and hand it off to implementation. But I really had not worked in a dedicated sales role that was focused on marketing, focused on advertising.
Mm-hmm.
So software or some type of advertising. And obviously I didn't want to do newspapers, right?
Yeah.
And there's levels, the software, right? Whether you selling the long form with licenses, or you trying to sell software as a service, which can sometimes be a little bit more transactional, but sometimes that can be long form too. So it was just a game where I didn't know. So I was interviewing with a bunch of companies while I was still with Comcast, denied. Eventually interviewed with a company called Centos. I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned Centos first. Let's say this: I didn't get the job with them. They brought me through 8 interviews, and if you're a salesperson out there, I don't ever speak bad about any company, but I would just say this: just know they really vet their sales professionals.
Yeah.
And so they had me put together this tool for the interview process called a brag book.
Mm-hmm.
A brag book is something that many sales professionals have heard of, maybe not seen. Some have heard of, and some have seen, and then some have never heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
But this was such a blessing in disguise. It had to be God for me to not get the job, but I was still required to put this brag book together to even interview to further my candidacy with them. And I walked away from the interview, not with the job offer, but with this brag book that continued to help me get to where I am today.
Yeah.
Eventually ended up landing a job with a company called Tegna, formerly known as Gannett, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, owner of NBC affiliated local TV stations throughout the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was based here in the Atlanta market, joined a pilot team where I worked as an account executive, and we pretty much targeted a little bit over 9 different markets throughout the U.S., selling obviously on-air TV time, commercials, commercial production support, digital marketing, and then also just a wide variety of marketing tools, whether from email marketing lists, the whole shebang. So this was really a pivotal time for me, and I joined Tegna. That was September 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I learned a lot at Tegna was that no matter how good you are, no matter what your background is coming from your previous companies, just never assume that just because you were so great somewhere else that it means you're going to be as great in your next place.
Yeah.
So a humble mentality is always important. And I'll also say this too: what some think is awesome, others think is average.
Yeah.
And that's a bar right there for a lot of young people. It is when you think your performance is awesome, you need to really start exposing yourself to other people's productivity, other people in the marketplace, other people in the field, and really learn and see is your performance, is it in that top 10%, or are you really in that top 50%, right?
Yeah.
And there's levels to it, and that's something you won't know until you kind of get
Expose
exposed
yourself.
to other individuals. And I got a chance to see, right? Yeah, I got a chance to learn and see and get rebuffed and get reproved and get a lot of constructive criticism about my sales skill. I had documentation. I had a lot of success, a lot of quota attainments. But obviously, to become more polished, to go to the next level, it was a very, very interesting experience, and it felt stressful. I love my team, but I had some difficulties there where I ran into an HR related situation with a former manager by the name of Amanda Craig. And long story short, she wanted to put me on a sales development plan, a performance improvement plan, if you will, unjustifiably. And so I took it to the HR director, and this process went on for maybe about the next 3 months, from December 2017 to February 2018. And in the outcome of it all, I ended up winning. And they wanted me to stay on with the team after proving my case about how I was being unjustly treated, about how the performance improvement plan was not appropriate under the circumstances. And also, I didn't mention this earlier, but I'll share this. In the midst of all of that, I was the top performing sales rep up to that point of the 3 account executives on the team. So it was a very interesting situation that did not make a lot of sense. That I learned a lot from my previous manager, Amanda. But thankfully, I was successful in my appeal to HR. And sometimes the best thing to prove that you're right is not even proving others wrong. Sometimes it's just about getting another job. And so after going through that experience, I actually was contacted by a company called Urban One Incorporated, and they said, "Hey, we're looking for a senior account executive to come on staff, but we want somebody who has digital marketing experience." Obviously, we sell radio broadcasting assets to advertisers, a little bit different than TV broadcasting, but we think this will be an easy transition for you. Mm-hmm. And I jumped at the opportunity. One, Black-owned company, never had worked in a Black-owned company, and really wanted to add that to my resume. I also wanted to be with a company where I felt like, even though it was specific, it was specialized, it wasn't so general market, I still wanted it to feel as if it was a top flight organization. It still felt like I didn't have to worry about, is my salary going to be there, and making sure I still had the proper support for a sales professional in the field. So I got all those things, and so I ended up making a transition from Tegna, even though after the completion of the HR case, they wanted me to stay. But I negotiated the severance with them at my request, and I took my ball and I left, and I went to play on a different playground. And so ended up at Urban One. This is February 2018, and I stepped into radio. And I'm gonna keep it real. I look back on it, and you could not have told me that was a smart decision while I was, just had joined Tegna, or while I was at Comcast to go into radio, selling radio broadcasting time. But I would say it really taught me a lot, and it ended up being the very thing that positioned me for what was next after that, which was eventually to join Google as an account strategist. So my time there, I really learned about a medium that, in a way you could say is dying, right? A lot of radio ad dollars are fleeing every single quarter, every single year away from there, going either online marketing, going to in some cases still going to print, still going to TV, might even be going OTT.
You said you didn't want to sell newspapers, so you just went to radio.
Right. It's like who goes from TV to radio kind of situation. But it ended up playing out, man. It worked out in my favor, and I think it really put me in a perfect position for Google in one way. And it's something I'll tell any young sales professional, any young professional. Loyalty to people is important. It's righteous. Loyalty to an organization, loyalty to some LLC, that's not something that I would ever subscribe to or put my name on. And the reason why I say that is the brand, the company that you work for, no matter how great you are, no matter how much money you generate for them, no matter how many initiatives you get implemented, if you in DE&I, no matter how many marketing objectives you get checked off if you lead in the marketing department, no matter what it is, something goes wrong with you, It's next man up.
Yeah.
The train gonna keep going.
Yeah, that's
They gonna
true.
call another conductor. And
Yeah.
so I'm really critical about loyalty to people, but don't show loyalty to organizations or to the company you work for. Not don't do anything illegal, but loyalty is something where I don't believe in staying at one place waiting for somebody else to die for you to get what's yours. I believe that right now, if you represent yourself properly, position yourself properly in the marketplace, and you do your research, there may be a job or a company that's willing to pay you 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe 50, maybe $60,000 more, maybe in a totally different focus area, maybe a totally different career path, maybe it's a totally different position with a different company.
Yeah.
It could be even something out of state, so I'm just one of those people where I believe identify the opportunities, keep your eyes open, and there's nothing wrong with talking. At least that's what my dad always told me. So
Yeah.
eventually after being with Urban One, really learning the radio industry, getting exposed to I remember one time Nipsey Hussle came in to Hot 1079 in Atlanta. God bless him, put some respect on his name. That was an iconic moment just to see him in passing. But made some good contacts there. Met Bree, who you know well, Bree Singleton.
Yes.
She,
Yep.
she was the promotion. She was the promotions director for, for I think that was for the Christian network they had there on the radio. But man, got an opportunity with Google where I was invited to it was an event through the talent and engagement organization at Google called Google Sandbox, and they hosted it at Ponce City Market. And it was like, hey, not a big crowd. They had like what they considered 50 people from a wide range of different backgrounds within sales and marketing for a 2-day conference. Went to it, amazing experience, met some really good people, and directly out of that experience, that conference, I met the recruiter who I ended up working with, who ended up helping me get a job directly, at Google as an accountancy sales team in GCS. And so just an amazing experience to get there. And I could recap it all, but the truth is, hey, know your worth and continue to evaluate it and keep putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
That was really a lot of the mentality to get me to that point.
Yeah. And I think the biggest nugget that I took from your story and your journey that you just shared was, you know, number one, you were open to opportunity, right? And when you got opportunity, you took
Yeah.
chances, right? Like you embarked on new opportunity. You didn't shy away from it, or you didn't get complacent with where you were, even though you were having success. And it's led you to,
Right.
one of the top companies in the world, one of the best companies in the world, from an employment perspective, but then also from a business perspective. And it seems like you're thriving in your career there as well. So, talk a little bit about your career at Google. I know we're coming up on the time that I said, I scheduled you for, but just talk about, a little bit about your time at
Yeah.
Google and what you're doing today.
Yeah, no. So started with Google May 13th, 2019. It was a life-changing experience. The interview process was unlike anything I had ever been through before. But more importantly, I had never worked a job that was outside of my hometown of Atlanta, Georgia. So this was the first career opportunity that I actually landed an offer for that took me all the way to California. And so I was in Silicon Valley, right in the mix out of San Francisco. And it was an experience unlike any other in terms of for me not graduating college and not really taking the college route. Valley was like my crash course. It was like a college campus environment. Is definitely a company where they hire people of all backgrounds, of all nationalities, of every particular silo you could fit human beings in. One thing they have that I had never seen before was so many young people,
Yeah.
people under the age of 40, in a wide variety of roles, whether individual contributors, senior individual contributors, or even leaders. It was just like, wow, so you got a chance to really work with some bright minds. And, I moved out there in May. I'm nervous, I'm scared, I'm going through every emotion, right? Like Nipsey Hussle said, I went through every emotion on this journey. And so I start to kind of find my footing. I'm trying to figure out where I fit. And obviously, as you know, being a Black in tech, it's an experience where you become a professional at being in rooms where nobody looks like you, right? And so that was a muscle I got a chance to further exercise. Not that was uncommon, but it was something that was certainly it was amplified more. When you get to Google, you really get to see why that percentage breakdown on the workforce is somewhere between 3 to 3.5% is Black. And so that was something that I had to kind of overcome and figure out. But beyond that, I mean, the experience at Google has been awesome. One of the best things about Google, I would say, is the investment that they make in their people before you even start. And that kind of just starts, particularly at, your conversations around your comp and what you make and all that good stuff. But I think the other piece is just the association of the brand, right? Of being able to say you work here, recognizing the impact that Google has on users across the world. We're talking about billions plus, and then, it's the opportunity to be exposed to the top technology, some of the top professionals, and then you have support that's above average on every aspect. So it's been a great experience up to this point. I started as an account strategist, really consulting agencies how to help their clients get the best return on ad spend. So that's kind of what I do now. So I'm a digital ad consultant. I did that for a year as an account strategist. Got a chance to work with different brands like GE Digital, Homedics. I work with a few other brands that I can't necessarily name due to NDA associations or issues per se, but the main thing, I got a chance to really work with accounts that were generating, that 8-figure number per quarter, and really to consult those agencies on how to make sure these clients get that best return. And so that was definitely an exciting experience. Did that for roughly about a year, and then fast forward to where we are now, May of this year, May 2020. I ended up getting an opportunity where I got a job as an account manager within large customer sales. And within that role, I support AT&T Communications, particularly 2 subsidiaries that they own, one being AT&T Business Services, which we focus obviously on the B2B front. And then also I manage Cricket Wireless, which is their prepaid mobility business. So, really where I am now, it seems like it's, 8 years has gone by. You reflect on it, it feels like it's been so much time, but it really hasn't. But the one thing I'll say, I'm just really grateful for having the wisdom and being exposed to not so much the right people per se, but being able to see the mistakes of the wrong people and really being able to learn from maybe, man, how did they end up with a master's degree or an MBA? They 10 years into their career, but they not really in that role that's fulfilling. They're not really in that position that's generating that 6-figure number that they want. They don't have that work-life balance of a position that they really worked hard for in terms of going back for that to graduate school and things of that nature. And I support everybody and anybody going to college. Shout out to my sister. She's about to be a graduating senior this year. But more importantly, it's just one of those things where everybody's path won't be the same. But I really looked around at the people that I was next to. I was competing against people with master's degrees, MBAs, against people who had the undergraduate, their BA and whatnot. So, I really tried to have to figure out how can I advance my career in a playing field where I'm not really set up for success, right? When you don't have a college degree trying to navigate the corporate landscape, you got to really be able to look at the field and find where you can exploit the weaknesses. And the one thing I can share with anybody, this applies to those who graduate college, those who don't, you got to be able to show proof that you can succeed. And how you do that, it goes back to a little nugget I shared about the Cintas job in the brag book. Having a brag book, having a compilation, a collection of of just complete proof of what you've been able to do, how you've been able to help companies generate a return on their investment in yourself, the business you brought in. It could be anything from training certificates. It could be a job offer that you got, that you took, or that you didn't take. The one thing I always use was save these documents, because this is going to be the differentiator that's going to say why we can trust Daylon to perform at this level for us versus another candidate who may have multiple letters behind their name. And that's just the most sincere way I can put it is, education is great, but it's a tool, right? Having a job is great, but that's just a tool. But the goal is to get a career opportunity that really puts you in a position to where now I can step away from Google and go do something else either on my own, or I can consult, or I could go work for another organization, and I continue to have this verification. I got this proof that says, hey, this is what I did for Google. Mm-hmm. This is what I did for this organization. And so that's just one of the few things that I did to really try to stand out in the marketplace when I kind of felt like I was playing at a bit of a disadvantage, not having the major tool, which is a college degree that most professionals have as business athletes.
Absolutely, man. And that's, another segment that I had listed here was to give advice for young people, but that advice on the brag book is so key. And I think that everyone should have a brag book. And I'm, you're one of my best friends, and I'm still working on my brag book to get as profound as yours, because, you sent it to me and I'm like, wow, like Daylon has done a lot, and it's just extremely impressive. And, if you don't mind sharing it, like I would love to get a copy of that so I could, and you could take out, what you feel like is important, or we can extract, or black out certain things. But I would love to share that with the community, just to see how they should be thinking about that brag book. Because I think that that's a true resource that can propel your career forward, and it's worked in your career as well. There's one last thing that I want to touch on with you, Daylon, before I let you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say, I'd definitely be happy to share a PDF copy, and definitely, that could be a later episode, and you could definitely cover it, but definitely something that's an essential tool for any professional to be able to show proof to say, hey, beyond a resume, here's the proof of what I've been able to do and what I can do for you as well.
Absolutely. So there's one last thing that I want to touch on with you, and that's the importance of voting. Me being a close friend of yours, I understand, just your political awareness and how important just local, state, and federal government is to everyone's life. Can you just give some words of encouragement around voting for our younger people?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, the main thing I would say is this. People say they want to get the bag. Everybody, I want to get the bag, I want to get the bag, I want to get the bag. All right. Well, what you're going to do with the bag, how you're going to protect the bag is by voting. And what I mean by that is when you vote for the right people that align with your interests, with your personal situation, whether that's where you are now or where you want to be or where you're planning to be, right? It gives you an opportunity to exercise your voice. Mm-hmm. And so the one thing I will share with anybody is this: you're not always going to get your way within a democracy, especially one that's a democratic republic. But you have the opportunity to exercise your voice to be heard.
Yeah.
And the only way that you can do that is by voting and by being involved, and also by staying aware. And so the same way a company will evaluate your professional skill set to see if there is the proper level of fitness for them to bring you on into their culture, it's the same approach you should take when evaluating candidates who are asking for your vote, who are making decisions that could one day affect yourself, maybe your children, maybe your sibling, maybe your parent. So no matter if it's a business matter or maybe if it's a criminal matter, it could be something as simple as taxation. I think it's very, very important that we vet these candidates appropriately. And I would also encourage this: if there's no new support, don't be afraid to write someone in. But I do think it's important that everybody exercise the right to vote and let your voice be heard.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you sharing those words, Daylon. So one last thing before we go, and that's the business tip of the week. And the business tip of the week is educate yourself on new ways of doing things. There's a quote from, you touched on Nipsey Hussle earlier, and there's a quote from Nipsey Hussle that said he elevated innovation over ignorance. And I want to leave you guys with that quote as you think about educating yourself on new ways of doing things. So with that being said, we're going to wrap up this week's episode of the Take Chances podcast. I'm extremely gracious to have Daylon Baker on the podcast, and I look forward to speaking with you all soon. Take chances.
Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.